Hello, my name is Eric Hibbard, and I chair Insight's Technical Committee, Cybersecurity and Privacy, which is heavily involved in the international information security, cybersecurity, and privacy protection standardization activities. And I operate in a variety of other organizations where security and privacy plays a significant part of what I do. I am a practicing security professional and a privacy professional. I've been doing that for quite some time. And what I'd like to do today is share with you some thoughts on what's going on in the cybersecurity and privacy landscape and a few trends that we think will be relevant for 2023. So as a starting point, let's take a look at what we're seeing are some of the current elements of the threat landscape. So the kinds of things that we in general have to sort of worry about. So at the top of this list is you see social engineering. And as we say in many circles, the weak link is typically what gets exploited, and often it's the human that is the weak link, as opposed to particular software or hardware kinds of systems. So as a result, there's a lot of adversaries or attackers will attempt some amount of social engineering to ease their way into your systems and in your data. We're also seeing something that's been around for quite a while is the advanced persistent threat. This is one of the more challenging aspects of attacks that we see. Typically, what this means is you've got an attacker that's gotten into your systems, your infrastructure, and they tend to lurk there for an extended period of time. They're trying to basically expand what they have access to. They do reconnaissance on you and your infrastructure, and they can be there for weeks, months, maybe even years before they ultimately take some sort of action. But while they're there, they do tend to have the ability to cause mayhem or difficulties, kind of at their whim. We obviously are seeing ransomware and the more general malware category. This is, again, not new. Ransomware has been around for a few years. It continues to be a plague. Who's being targeted is continually changing. We're seeing that no user is too large, too small for some of the ransomware gangs that are out there. They've been known to attack individuals, and they often size the ransom to the victim. Again, we're seeing unpatched and unupdated systems as sort of a contributing factor to the threat landscape. In many instances, attacks could have been thwarted if basic patching had been applied, or ancient, obsolete, unpredictable operating systems or applications had been eliminated, but they still persist, and of course they present lots of opportunities to attackers. Similar is problems around misconfigurations of security systems and software. So it can give the illusion that protections are in place when in fact they may in fact be offering no protection whatsoever, or they may be there to mitigate a particular threat, and they may not in fact be doing that. So this is definitely one of those other areas where failure to check to see if your security is configured correctly can result in lots of problems. Denial of service is something that's been around for quite some time. It persists It's not just websites. We've seen financial institutions have had ATMs go offline for extended periods of time, as a result of denial of service attacks. These can be directed at critical infrastructure. They can be, directed at certain sort of medical devices. The results can be devastating in some cases, annoying under sort of less sort of threatening kinds of scenarios. Seeing lots of sensitive data is continuing to be exposed. This is increasingly a problem for enterprises as the regulations continue to increase. And basically, if you are not taking steps to secure the data that you are housing, you could find yourself in significant difficulty with some of these regulators. We're seeing injection attacks where they're going after databases or certain kinds of web applications. Again, this has been around for quite some time, and again, it's in many cases these attacks are known and have been known for quite some time, but organizations fail to deal with them. Again, the results can be quite painful if you end up with an attack. Cryptojacking, what we're seeing here is theft of cryptocurrencies. We're seeing systems being compromised and being used to mine cryptocurrencies, and this again is likely to continue, especially with the value of cryptocurrencies going up as high as they have in the past. So when there's fluctuations, then we see sort of ebbing and flowing of these kinds of attacks. Cyber physical attacks, these are often against things like manufacturing or again critical infrastructure, and the results can be quite nasty, cause lots of problems for society and citizens in general. We're seeing problems with authentication and access control mechanisms. In some cases, they're just flat out broken or only partially doing what they're supposed to do. This could even involve things like multi-factor authentication, which is poorly configured and easily bypassed. These are kind of problems that, if left unattended, attackers will quickly find and fully exploit. The next one is associated with, think of that as your supply chain. So third parties, especially trusted third parties who may have access to some set of your systems, or there's a trust relationship between their infrastructure and your infrastructure, and if they get compromised, that access can then be used to compromise you. And some of the fairly large data breaches in the past have been of this nature. So, for example, an HVAC vendor, was attacked, and then a major enterprise is then compromised as a result of that. There's long been the problem of insider problems. What we're now seeing is actual theft. Whether this is stealing actual money or data or using resources that for private business, side jobs. This stuff is definitely going on, and so we're seeing increased sort of monitoring of users to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and haven't sort of wandered off the reservation, if you will. The mobile space, as we become more and more dependent on smartphones and tablets, some cases replacing traditional laptops and desktops, we're seeing the attackers have taken note, and there are now multiple forms of malware that are going after these platforms, and for some of the same purposes. They're going after account access. In particular, if they can gain access to your, not just your personal data, but access to your banking information and whatnot, they can very quickly siphon off a lot of money. Loss of devices continues to be a problem. In particular, if you're an enterprise and you've got personal data or data that's got all kinds of restrictions on it, if that turns out to be on one of these devices, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone or whatever it is, this could result in data breach protocols having to be invoked, in response to a loss. Cross-site scripting, historically has been part of the web, scene. Again, it's still there. It's definitely exploited. Many of these, there are mitigations for those, but they just haven't been implemented. We're seeing lots of interesting uses of man-in-the-middle attacks. Some of these take the form of, for example, when you touch down at an airport, and you pull out your smartphone as soon as you land, and you connect, and you think you're connected with your favorite telco provider, but you may in fact have connected with a node that's impersonating the tower, if you will, and it's relaying your information, but it's also monitoring everything you do, unless you've got some sort of encryption that's basically invoked prior to that access. And last but not least, we're seeing things like the Internet of Things, edge devices, not necessarily smart, just lots of them. And what we mean by weaponized is essentially they're being used to maybe to do denial of service attacks, or again, it may be a way to sort of work your way into enterprises' infrastructure. It may be the weak link that they go after, and they often don't get the attention that they potentially should have from a security perspective. Right. So who's portraying these kinds of attacks? That some of which I've already mentioned. The more common ones involve cyber terrorists. Terrorists, as the name implies, their real focus is creating mayhem, fear, disrupting society, and using cyber techniques. They in fact can do quite a bit of damage in that arena. We've got most governments have both defensive and offensive capabilities in the cyberspace, and they may in fact have sponsored other actors to work on their behalf or work at arm's length. But these attackers are typically well-funded, well-educated, well-armed, well-motivated, and they can be quite effective in the damage they could do with their attacks. Another dangerous group is organized crime and cyber criminals. Their focus tends to be on sort of monetary interests, but these groups bring all of their sort of historical bad behaviors, their techniques to the cyber part of the world, and so things like kidnapping and murder are in range of things that they may do so that they can get access to the systems and ultimately breach data or gain monetary values. The hacktivists, these are basically protesters that just have moved into the sort of the digital or cyber arena. They have a variety of political agendas. Seems like there's an increasing number of them, and rather than chaining themselves to a tree or boat or whatever they would historically use to get attention, they're now using cyber equivalents to doing some of that to draw attention to their causes. Again, insiders, these are the people that you trust, and if not watched, they can run afoul of the law as well as policies and procedures, and cause a fair amount of difficulty. We also have script kiddies, and historically, these are you think of those as the teenage hackers. They're trying out their newfound skills. They can be annoyance, but they can also cause some significant damage, and often they don't necessarily understand the nature of the damage that they may have caused. And last but not least, just your average user, through errors, mistakes, can result in significant problems that could result in data loss, corruption. They could through misconfigurations expose sensitive data, things of that nature. So why do they do these things, these threat actors? With the possible exception of the errors, typically there's political, economic, technical, or military agendas that are at play. I would say that the next one, profit or financial gain, plays a major role in a lot of the kinds of attacks we're seeing these days. There's a certain amount of notoriety. Again, this may play into sort of the script kiddie kind of space. Revenge shows up as well. So, this could show up on the hacktivist side. But anybody that's become annoyed or unhappy with a particular enterprise, it's not all that difficult to extract pain using sort of the cyber side of the world to do that. And of course, you can get a combination of some or all of these as part of the motivation. The key thing to remember here is security is basically a people problem. We wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't have these technologies. We wouldn't have these processes if we didn't have people just going off and doing malfeasant kind of behavior. In general, systems haven't been attacking systems. Maybe that'll change with things like artificial intelligence. But in general, we're still in a position where it's these bad actors are off doing things that are generally causing problems. So I'd like to talk about some security developments that you might want to take note of. We're definitely seeing uptakes in nation state actors. How active they are. There are a fair number of conflicts around the world right now, and typically there's an element of cyber warfare that accompanies that, and because of the amount of the conflicts we have, they're very active right now, and the number of players has increased as well. We're seeing what are called access brokers. So these are individuals or groups who have acquired credentials that will allow them, for example, to access maybe privileged accounts in a variety of organizations, and they're offering to sell that data to interested parties being other attackers. These access brokers right now are tending to target academia, some of the technology companies, and a lot of the industrials. And no surprise, there's a lot of intellectual property in these organizations, and a lot of potential gain. So there's quite a bit of money to be made for these access brokers. We're seeing, malware has been a problem for a long time, and we're seeing a lot of adversaries are less focused on the malware, which is kind of a one and done. You get hit with it, then you basically recover, respond, and until you plug whatever the hole was that caused you to get hit. The adversaries are now trying to get the access and expand that access and be persistent in your infrastructure. In other words, make it very hard for you to be able to eject them, even if you know they're there. Kind of related, we're seeing what we call technology giants are definitely targets at this point. We're seeing lots of data theft, source code thefts, extortions associated with both of those. big money to be had here. There's a lot of reputational issues that come to bear. Social engineering, we're seeing it morph a bit, and part of that is to help overcome the increased use of multi-factor authentication. So there's some definitely creative ways to try and get around the use of MFA, and some of it is being pretty effective. With the heavy use of cloud computing, there's definitely efforts by the attackers to do what we call account discovery. They're trying to see how organizations and individuals are using the cloud and possibly intercept credentials that they can then use to go in and do a variety of things, which in fact could be destructive actions, where you're removing accounts, you're deleting or destroying data, you're getting rid of resources, and even stopping services, which could have pretty significant impacts on an organization that's dependent on their cloud capabilities. We're also seeing activism. There's just a phenomenal number of political ideals that are operating in this space, and that doesn't think it's going to slow down at all. From a privacy perspective, we're more regulatory activity. We don't see this slowing down. It's currently projected about 2/3 of the world's population is covered by some of these more modern privacy regulations, and again, we should expect that to increase. As part of these regulations, there's a minimum level of security is basically necessary. You've got to guard against data loss and information leaks or unauthorized data processing operations. And failure to do that could constitute a major violation in some of these regulations. There's a lot of concern about the use of automated decisions. And we're seeing increased restrictions when those kind of automated decisions could significantly impact an individual. And another area, if you're familiar with machine learning and big data, things of that nature, if you're using any sort of data science, increasingly the way you use your algorithms or algorithmic accountability is becoming an issue. In fact, if you don't have your algorithmic operations under control, so to speak, you may not be able to use your data science, at least the way you hope to do that. So let me touch on a few trends for 2023. From an adversary perspective, ransomware is back, more dangerous, blended forms. Shouldn't be a surprise. It's a moneymaker, so it's going to continue. We're seeing attacks against non-traditional technologies, cars, toys, smart cities. So it's not just your web servers, not just your email servers, not your desktops. It's a bunch of other things as well. We're seeing attacks against critical infrastructure. Some of these are really, trying to basically send a message, have an impact on society. Whether it's depriving you access to gasoline at your favorite gas pump, or if your power goes out for an extended period of time. These are the kinds of attacks that we're definitely seeing. Attacks against firmware. So parts of systems that historically have not really been subject to these kind, the focus of attacks. Definitely seeing more of those. So it's not just the operating system, but it may be components that sit, underneath the operating system. The nation states and their attacks, as I said earlier, they've got their targets lined up. What we're seeing now is that they may be going after allies as well. So the who they're attacking, can definitely be expanded. And we're seeing a lot of action in 5G and against application programming interfaces. So essentially, the attackers are You're going after 5G because that's where the mobile platforms are, and lots of data, lots of juicy targets there. APIs, are part of the mechanisms that they can use to go after the applications, or this may be how applications are potentially interacting. So, what are we seeing in terms of defensive response to all of this? Well, some of the interesting trends is we're seeing adoption of zero trust. So the assumption that there's a perimeter is basically gone. Individual systems are being configured to you operate as if in a hostile environment that has no other protection. This is definitely something the U.S. government agencies are having to deal with, but it is of interest to many others. We're seeing, insiders, continue to be a problem, but organizations are no longer just firing them; they're now prosecuting them. Sends a pretty strong message, when some of the statutes are used to nail these insiders, and shouldn't be a surprise, if an enterprise has a particular problem and the authorities show up and they rather than saying, yeah, we're not going to press charges. That's not what's happening now. Seeing lots of changes in cyber insurance. It's getting harder to get, harder to maintain it, and the coverage may be much less than what you may have expected. The short answer is this isn't the days of buying insurance and doing nothing are gone. To get it, you may actually have to have your act together and maintain it. To maintain your security, to maintain your policy. And again, we're seeing movement away from a large number of point solutions, which equals complexity, to approaches where you've got a single platform that's basically used to deal with a much broader set of security coverage, managed services, things of that nature. It brings its own set of challenges and issues, but what organizations are finding is that having all this complexity usually results in it either not being configured or used in a way that was originally intended, or there's interoperability issues that really diminish the protections that they were looking for. Cloud is continuing to be used, and this digital transformation is growing. There's lots of activities, and when you look at sort of the data sovereignty and privacy issues around, what we see are potentially restrictions in this space. And as I said, the regulations are continuing to proliferate. Unfortunately, they're not being harmonized, and so if you're operating in lots of different jurisdictions, the complexities are definitely increasing, even in the United States, where you've got multiple federal regulations that may apply, and each of the states have their own set of issues that that they're imposing. So that's a bit of the landscape and what to watch out for this year. We hope that this information is of value to you. We ask that you please take a moment to rate the session. The feedback we get from you is important. We use that to make decisions on doing sessions like this in the future. And with that, I wish you a good day and a safe cyber adventure.